He was the most senior Asian police officer in the UK. He won numerous awards, including the CBE for policing. Not one to shy away from controversy. Our guest today is the bold, the inspirational, and the very determined Tariq Ghafoors. Welcome to our show, Tariq.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on such short notice, by the way.
No
really
problem.
Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
So, Tariq, going back to when you were young, I believe you, your family came from Uganda, and you lived your earlier years in East Africa. Why did you guys move?
Well, it's quite an interesting story because my parents and my grandparents were born in Punjab in India. And of course we had the partition. Just after the partition, the British were building railway in East Africa. So they moved over to East Africa, and then we settled in Uganda. And of course that's where my early childhood was. So up to the age of about 16, I lived and grew up in Uganda. But then there was a person, a traitor called Idi Amin, who effectively decided one day that he's going to kick everybody out of Uganda. But just prior to him kicking us out, I'd already come to UK to study, you know, as you know.
Okay, what were you studying?
Well, it was, you know, in our communities, you either had to be a teacher or a doctor
or engineer.
or engineer, exactly. So, you know, it was my kind of early aspiration to be a doctor. So I'd come here to do my A-levels in science subjects. Then my parents and my family got kicked out. So things started to change from there.
When you came to England, what was your first reaction? Big change from Uganda?
Well, it was. I mean, the first reaction was I came here in February and it was damn cold. And I remember coming off, you know, the airline and at one of the airports, and I thought, good grief, what have I got into? But everything seemed so structured, so systematic here, you know, and so in many ways bright, because to a certain extent, you know, Uganda was still a developing country.
So why did you decide to become a police officer? Why policing? You were studying medicine.
I know initially it was just purely, you know, circumstances. As I said, my parents got kicked out. They came here without a penny. And I was
because your father was quite well-to-do, wasn't he?
Extremely. We had a building construction company there.
Yes.
He was a local politician up there.
Yeah.
And yes, we were successful, but overnight they were kicked out with not a single penny, so they became refugees.
Oh my God, so it was almost like riches to rag.
Well, exactly. Effectively, they had nothing, and I was the eldest in the family. Then I had to make a choice, and you know, the choices at 16 and 17 were somewhat limited. I was 17 years of age.
So why did you join the police force?
Well, you know, because I could have joined any of the services. I could have joined the army, the navy, fire service, etc. But my mother didn't want me to go away from home. You know, they wanted us to all live together. So I used to play a bit of sport with police, and I thought, well, I'll give it as a taster. So when I came into the police, initially it was just purely as a stopgap. And get some money and get the family settled down. But when I came in, I realized there's a tremendous career to be made here. And I started my long journey and ended up spending 34 years in policing.
But when you joined, you were one of the 2 ethnic police officers in a force of 6,000. You know, you must have stuck out like an odd thumb.
Well, I never realized it, you know, because I went to the local training center, spent 13, 14 weeks there, enjoyed myself quite significantly. I was learning new things. I was learning the law. I was kind of engaging in all the activity.
So you felt comfortable in your skin?
Well,
you didn't feel like you were the odd one out?
No, because you know, when people are born here and they go through schooling systems, they go through and they grow up, they see this kind of, some of the prejudice that occurs. I never did. Never, or if it was there, I didn't actually visualize it. But the interesting thing was that my very first day, there was a small police station called Salford. I came into the police station in uniform, and they wouldn't believe I was a policeman. So they wouldn't let me in. So an inspector had to vouch for me, you know, so that was my first experience. But often, you know, when people used to abuse me and they used my color of skin to abuse me, I just thought they was merely an extension. I didn't kind of internalize it. But of course, people who are born here, who go through the system, they feel they're being disadvantaged. They internalize it more than I did, actually.
But there must have been challenges of being a non-white officer in a predominantly white police force.
Initially, I didn't kind of feel that there was a challenge, because I was a good operational officer. I worked in some tough areas, and, you know, enjoyed myself. You know, young, vibrant kind of person. But I think as I got through the ranks, you know, I started to see really, some of the difficulties some of the officers, particularly from minority communities, were facing, and some of them I had to provide support to, some of them I had to mentor and coach, and I think my awareness increased as it kind of I was going up the ranks in different areas, and I think quite clearly some of those times were difficult.
Why do you feel, Tariq, that even though Asians are the largest ethnic minority in the UK, but don't you feel we are underrepresented in the police force?
Well, not only police force. I think there is a real problem in public services right across the board. I mean, if you look...
Is it a problem from our end that we don't want to participate, or is it a problem from the other side that we're not welcome?
I think both. One, in the sense that, if you are under scrutiny all the time, then you have to be better. And you have also, got to be able to sustain some very, very difficult times and periods. And also when you're different, people, you have a great deal of focus on you. So I think in that sense, you really have got to have very good support, you've got to have good mentors, you've got to have good coaches. On the other hand, sadly, I think what I found, unlike in the US or in Canada, where if you're competent, you've got skills, people might not lack the background you're from, you still will make it. Here, sometimes, people like to surround themselves with like-minded people, so you're much more likely to be judged on your ability to fit in, really, rather than bring this kind of individuality, bring the diversity. And as in public sector, and this is a problem in public sector, because you can look at government, you can look at local authorities, you can look at the high echelons of the managerial sector in the health service, in education, that we don't have people at the top. And part of that is sometimes, you are competing as people who know how to get through the system. And of course, there is discrimination and there is prejudice.
Like there's a glass, some women feel there's a glass ceiling for them in the corporate structure when you're going higher up the ladder. And do you feel it's the same way?
Yeah, of course, until there are appreciable numbers. And one of the solutions that has been, I've just come back from South Africa, US I've been a lot, that people, they started to initiate what is called affirmative action, positive action. And in fact, what that started to do was to put people, perhaps sometimes wrongly, into positions. But once, the critical argument I used to make for people to be represented at the top were two. One is that you have to create role models, that you got to have people who can look up to and say, well, that person has reached that. And I thought I was quite a strong role model in that aspect.
A lot of people I've interviewed have actually said there's a big importance, and they all are achievers, and they've said there's a big importance to role models and to mentors. And it can really help someone develop their personality and develop their skill set if they have one.
I entirely agree with that. If you've got good mentors, you have role models in positions, then it actually, in a visible sense, gives people, inspires people to actually aim for that. I think there is another very serious reason, is that if you look at our communities, they're very extremely diverse. Those communities rely on public services in various forms, including the police. Now, you can't have people, at the top who are not emotionally connected to those communities.
You need to be accessible to your community.
Yeah, not only accessible, you need to understand it, you need to feel it, you need to kind of understand the emotions within those communities. And I think that is where I excelled, in the sense that, not only professionally, operationally I was good. I commanded 27,000 officers in the Met during my period here. But I also, met a huge amount of communities and I was just kind of counting the other day that I'd probably seen face to face in London and talked to about 2.8 million people.
Wow.
And of course...
So what did you most enjoy about your job as a police officer?
I mean, working with some very talented people, and secondly, the feeling that I was engaging in public good, in a public service, in the sense that, contributing towards creating safer communities, sometimes kind of, picking out of those communities what I call dysfunctional role models, the criminals, and actually putting them through the criminal justice system. But there are dangers
involved to your job. Did you ever have a near-death experience?
once or twice. I mean, we were involved in some serious disorder. I was a sergeant in a place called Moss Side when there were riots. During the miners' strike, we were faced with some intense disorder in a little village. And
by disorder, you mean like guns?
No, well, in UK we're lucky that there are not many guns.
Yeah.
And you don't have, an instance, most of the police officers are not armed.
Yes.
Where people routinely...
But don't you think they should be?
No.
Really?
No, I think we have strong gun laws here. We have majority of the population don't carry guns. When the guns are used, they're used on what we call bad on bad. And police officers, we're the only major city in the world where police officers don't carry guns. So
and they can still effectively police without guns.
And in many ways, policing is about policing with consent and cooperation of the communities. And I think the more kind of,
But how can you police a criminal with consent?
Well, the criminals will not use guns on police. It's very rare where we get instances where, criminals will use guns on fellow criminals to settle scores. But
so they're conscious that way?
Well, I think logically most of the gun crime is on people who know each other rather than strangers. So we don't get drive-by shootings like, is the case in the US.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is a need. And the longer we can keep that, the better it is, because policing is being part of the community. And if you're part of the community, you get good community intelligence, which helps you to solve crime. And if you move beyond that and become an army of occupation on the public, on the communities, I think that's dangerous.
Now, you also did a master's in criminology. Did that help your career?
Well, what happened is that, as I said earlier, I came into study.
Yeah.
And when I joined the police, I obviously missed that opportunity. So what I did was I did 10 years of part-time study. So I did my degree in public administration and politics.
Yes.
Then I did a master's. At that time, if I had done a PhD, a doctorate, I would have been told, well, this is not an operational police officer, he's an academic.
Yes.
So I stopped there.
So you enjoyed studying?
Yeah, I enjoyed studying. I got a lot of value. And in fact, it took me out of the bubble of just policing, meeting different people. So that helped itself.
But your career progressed quite rapidly through the ranks. Do you feel that it was because you had, you made the effort to go get degrees, you went to the US, you got trained by the FBI, you went to the FBI Academy? Do you feel that all those factors?
Yeah, absolutely, because one thing was that I kept myself very focused on operational policing, even as a leader. I spent most of my career in operational policing. So I didn't drift off into some kind of, headquarters jobs or whatever. So I think focus on what my core role was, leading and inspiring teams. I think that helped. Secondly, yes, I had to be better. Just being rounded, and accepting that you have to be better, I think that helped me. And the other thing is I didn't jump through the ranks. Every rank I got into,
one step at a time.
I got the grounding, and then I moved on to the next rank, and slowly, and I also moved around different police forces, competed against other people to get jobs. So I think all that kind of hard work, commitment, belief in oneself that they can do better actually helped me.
Tariq, we'll go for a short break. See you soon.